Guess what I'm not wearing right now? The Dark Knight is co-written, co-produced, and directed by Christopher Nolan, and it stars Christian Bale, Heath Ledger, Aaron Eckhart, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Michael Caine, Gary Oldman, and Morgan Freeman. The Joker's in town and he's looking to test Batman mentally and physically while screwing with the mob. The Dark Knight is a film that I hold very close to my heart, and as odd as it might sound, talking about it is gonna be hard without getting emotional, but for the sake of this review, I'm gonna try and hold off on the waterworks. The day that I saw this film is a day that I will never ever forget, and it honestly feels like it was yesterday. July 20th, 2008, my birthday, best present ever, by the way. My dad had bought tickets in advance, but unfortunately we could not get into the IMAX that we usually go to, so we had to settle for the other IMAX that was a little further away and didn't have as much seating, but it was still the IMAX, so I was satisfied. We got there a half hour early, thinking that we'd have a good chance of getting a decent seat. We weren't the brightest bunch back then. We ended up being the second to last people in line. There was this one guy who came up behind us about, I don't know, 2 minutes prior to them actually letting us in. I recall walking into the theater and realizing quite quickly that we had really little to no options when it came to seating. We ended up sitting in the second to last row of the very bottom on the right side. It wasn't the most comfortable seating, but I was willing to suffer. This was, after all, The Dark Knight. The movie eventually starts. It's a packed house, not a soul is talking, no cell phones are out, nothing. And that first shot comes on, and my eyes are just glued to the screen like they have never been before. Because I was not going to miss 1 millisecond of this film. And then that shot comes where those two guys are going across the building via that wire, and I'm like this. And before seeing this film, I'd actually seen the prologue when I went to see I Am Legend in the IMAX. So I already knew what happened in the first 6 minutes, but I acted like I hadn't. The first 6 minutes of this film are just pure gold. And the camera in that scene is basically the eye of the Joker, because the camera is showing you only what it wants you to see. And as that 6 minutes goes along, it's just stringing you along and stringing you along, and then eventually it's revealed to you what's really going on, and you can't believe it. Pure gold. And then the rest of the film played out, and suffice to say that my life has never been the same. Every filmmaker, every actor, every producer, pretty much anyone in the film business has that one film that changed their life and made them see films differently. And The Dark Knight is, for me, in a nutshell, that one film. Prior to The Dark Knight, I had viewed films really only as entertainment, a way to pass the time, a way in which to escape the dullness of everyday school life and just everyday life in general. But The Dark Knight opened up a whole new avenue for me, and for the first time, I viewed film as more than just entertainment. I viewed it as art. And I realized that behind that camera are tons of people all working towards one goal. I recognized the importance of the script, the actual performance, the direction, the cinematography, the score, just everything. And after this film, Wally Pfister became my favorite DP. And at the time, I didn't even know what the heck DP meant. And Hans Zimmer's score, man, I mean, that score just brings every scene to life. It just brings more life to it, you know, especially the opening. And in my humble opinion, the bank heist in this film is the best ever caught on film, bar none. And probably my favorite opening scene of any film. What makes it so unique is that Nolan used the IMAX format in a way never thought possible. Instead of using it to shoot just pure like environment, like, you know, space or the mountains, he used it to shoot narrative film. It brought quite a bit of challenges because it's a very heavy camera, it's a very loud camera, but it pays off. It so pays off. It makes for an immersive experience that you just cannot match. And all the IMAX footage in general in this film is beyond breathtaking, and the action scenes were just amplified by it. And speaking of action scenes, one of my top 3 favorite car chases. Far exceeds the chase and begins, in my opinion, and of course, no shaky cam. Yes. And that goes for the rest of the action scenes as well. And while I'm not mentioning anything new, I just cannot talk about this film without at least mentioning Heath Ledger. The man deserves all the praise and more. He was... There was a huge debate on and off the internet after the film came out about who was the better Joker, Nicholson or Ledger. I, hands down, prefer Ledger. However, I don't think it's very fair to compare the two because both actors played it very differently. Ledger played the more psychotic version of Joker while Nicholson played the more clown-like version of Joker. And both actors were under very different directions. Tim Burton is not Nolan and vice versa. Two different Jokers, two different films. But I hands down prefer Ledger. And how Ledger got himself into that emotional state, I will never know because I'm not an actor and I'm not trained to be an actor, but I can only imagine how it must have felt for the director, producers, just everyone else to be on set with him because that must have been something else. Then the film ended and the audience clapped very loudly for a solid 10 seconds. And I walked out of that theater and three things happened. The Dark Knight became my favorite movie of all time. Christopher Nolan became my favorite director / hero. And third, and most importantly, I came to realize that it was my destiny to become a movie director. Because prior to The Dark Knight, I had known that I wanted to be in the film business. I knew that without a shadow of a doubt. I just didn't know where. I knew I wanted to be behind the camera, I just didn't know in what department. But The Dark Knight solved that for me. Today, The Dark Knight is no longer my favorite film of all time. However, it remains to be my second favorite film of all time. Christopher Nolan, though, is still my favorite director. And it's for the simple reason that he's the only director that I've seen find a perfect balance between action and drama. All of his films have interesting plots, well-developed characters, and, starting with Begins, incredible action sequences. He never sacrifices action for story or story for action, and I love him for that. And now we come down to the problems. There are none. Some may say I'm pushing it, but this is a masterpiece. Could I nitpick? Yeah, but you don't need to. I love it to death, and I never get tired of watching it. Total of 20 times. Once in the IMAX, 19 on Blu-ray. But it probably doesn't compare to some of you out there who've watched it literally 100 times. I'll get there eventually. I'll never tire of watching the film, and much like Begins, it has a perfect ending with a third film imminent, but with much higher expectations. The Dark Knight deserves no less than 5 stars. My question to you this time is, Batman Begins or The Dark Knight? Which one do you prefer? Dark Knight, obviously. Alright. That was exhausting. I'll see you guys in a week for The Dark Knight Rises. You have no idea how happy I am to say that. And I don't think I have to spell it out for you guys, but please see this in IMAX. You owe it to Nolan and yourself. 'Cause at the end of the day, you can either watch a movie or be part of one. Clearly you know which route I'm taking.